Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for attending the webinar, which will focus on accelerating the deployment of DH systems through standards. Just a few housekeeping things. The chat will remain open throughout the webinar, so please use it to submit your questions and be a little bit patient. And during the Q&A, I will put the questions through to our speakers who will be happy to answer them. For now, I will introduce you to the speakers today. So we will have Éloi Piel, the Market Intelligence Director at Euroheat Power, Tina Vengsgaard from the Danish Standards, Andrea Gulaxi from Sensenelec, Brian Van Mathiesen from Aalborg University, Neil Perry from Armstrong Fluid Technology, Tue Christensen from Sonborg Varme, Lisa Almqvist from the Swedish Standards Institute. So for now, I will leave the floor to my colleague Éloi for a quick introduction and welcoming words. Éloi, please.
Good morning to all. Thank you, Crelida. I'm very glad today that we organize this webinar with our partners from Danish Standards. Standardization is an important aspect of business developments. In all economic sectors, there are standards underpinning the development of new projects, and standards are, for the district heating sector, increasingly important for a series of reasons. First, standards will be instrumental to accelerate the pace of the heat transition in Europe. Today in Europe, our sector meets 12% of the heat demand and provides a sustainable supply of energy based on renewables and energy efficiency to over 70 million citizens. Green fuels and industrial waste heat represent over 40% of the mix of district heating, when the remaining share of fuels is used in the most efficient way in installations co-generating heat and electricity. What we see is that the growth of district heating will serve the realization of the European Green Deal agenda. And current trends show that investments in our sector are focusing on new sustainable sources like waste heat from industry, from the service sector, large heat pumps, geothermal, and solar. A recent study by Aalborg University showed that district heating could nearly double to a 20% market share by 2030 and nearly 50% by 2050, helping Europe to cut gas imports and gradually decouple the heat market from the direct use of fossil fuels. In some countries, we see a large potential for our sector to grow. This is true for the Netherlands, for Belgium, for the UK, for France, for Germany. And in other countries where district heating is well established, governments have confirmed its role in national energy and climate plans. So in these countries, district heating will further contribute to decarbonize the heat market and is set to play a much broader role in the energy transition by fostering sector coupling. In recent months, we have seen in Europe, as a reaction to the energy crisis, many governments and cities to take new actions to stimulate the growth of district heating. And we know that deployment can be very quick. In some countries like Austria or Switzerland, the sector has been growing very fast in the last decade. Now we can also see uncertainty on some markets where district heating is only starting to grow. And there are many reasons which can explain slow growth. And one of the reasons on new markets is also the lack of standardization in our sector compared to other sectors where standards are well developed. And such a situation can result in higher costs for projects and also suboptimal design. So in conclusion, we will need standards to accelerate the heat transition. And Lisa will further develop on the importance of standardization and on the recent extension of the scope of TC 107 to include district heating systems. Second point, there is a lot in the news these days on COP28, and actually looking from a global perspective, the International Energy Agency foresees that district heating will double by 2050 at global level. I refer here to the net zero roadmap they published this year in September. In other recent publications, the IEA has also highlighted the increasing demands for cooling and the role our sector, in particular district cooling, could play to meet these demands in the most sustainable way. And in this global context, standards will also be very important. They will create trust and reinforce the advantage of our sector to propose solutions that are sustainable and competitive. So I'm looking forward to the good discussions today. Thank you, Crelida.
I think you're on mute, Crelida.
You are muted, Crelida.
Technical problem number one. Thank you, Eloi, for the insights into DHC in Europe and for highlighting the importance of standards in bridging the gap between ambitions for the sector and their practical implementation. I will now give the floor to Tina from the Danish Standards. Tina, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Really happy to be here virtually today and gathering around this important agenda. So my name is Tina Vengsgaard, and yes, I'm the Standardization Director for Danish Standards. And I will start this morning just by giving a little bit of background as to why we have taken this initiative. First of all, just to mention that Danish Standards is the Danish standardization body. And we develop standards and we manage and facilitate standardization committees in collaboration with both national and international stakeholders, as well as the international standardization organizations being ISO, IEC, CEN, and CENELEC. And Danish Standard has taken this initiative to extend the scope of the current CEN TC 107 to include standardization at system level of district heating and cooling systems. So moving from a product focus into a system focus, which is what we'll be hearing a lot more about today. During the last 15 years, we have been managing the secretariat of the CEN TC 107 district heating and cooling system from Denmark. With EU initiatives like REPowerEU, the Fit for 55, and the revision of the EU energy directives, there is basically, of course, an urge to accelerate the transition to a clean energy system in Europe. And at Danish Standards, we see it as a very important task to drive the European agendas through these standardization initiatives. And of course, clearly from our perspective, also where Denmark has a front-runner position. So this initiative is in support, of course, of the EU standardization strategy to take European lead in order to benefit the European competitiveness and resilience and ensure that standard supports our investments in the green transition, as Eloi also just pointed out. Aim of this initiative is to support the EU policies and legislation under the REPowerEU and the Fit for 55, again, urging this acceleration of the transition to a clean energy system in Europe. And the next point here is an important one. The committee will provide a fair and collaborative platform for European experts and stakeholders across the energy system value chain to develop horizontal standards, and then we're back to system standards, that support a smart, sector-coupled, renewable-based and cost-efficient energy system. So again, a lot of words, and we'll hear more about what's actually behind it later on, but again, moving from a product focus into a system focus. The clean energy transition calls for common European standards. to create this clarity and this coherence, so the connection for all the different actors involved, such as decision makers, planners, and of course also importantly, investors. There are huge investments at stake in the green energy transition, and the European standardization can ensure that we have the right framework and the right tools to get it right, and hopefully from the beginning. Last but not least, we also want to say we have a great team here in Denmark heading the secretariat. And for anyone at this call who would like to join or know more about the work, they can reach out to Henrik or Birgitte, and they're also happy to guide you onwards to local or national standardization organizations, but can handle any questions you might have. So please feel free to reach out to the people on this slide. And I heard, and maybe Khalida can just follow up, that they will be available afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina, for briefly touching on building and upgrading the heating and cooling infrastructure in an efficient manner, and for the policy areas that you have highlighted and where standards can have a very positive impact. I would now move on to welcome Andrea Gulaxi from Senelec, which is the body responsible for standardization at European level. Welcome, Andrea. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Khalida. Good morning from my side as well. I think it is a very timely event. As Eloy pointed out, the discussions are dominated by COP28, so it's very nice to see that both as industry and as standardization organizations, we are positioning ourselves and for Europe. As mentioned by Khalida, I represent here the European Standardization Organizations. Tina mentioned that Danish Standard is a member of SEN, of ISO as well, of course, Senelec, IEC. We are framed, if you want, within the European Standardization Organizations by our Strategy 2030, which is very much guided by the green and digital transition. So having this discussion today and making sure that we develop standards that are stakeholder-driven, industry-driven, that we have all voices around the table, to make sure we have system standards, as Tina mentioned them. So making sure we address the needs of our evolving industry is super important. And I think the role of standards, particularly in today's world, is to make sure that we have this match and link between policy outsets and goals and ambitions and deliver concrete market solutions for industry like Euroheat Power and the representatives, of course, online today. Something that I would like to stress and mention is, of course, the fact that at the moment we are looking at a lot of different ambitions towards sustainable, towards the REPowerEU that was mentioned. It's a lot of ambitions are being set on the energy renewable directives, on the high-level forum that we know is also setting a lot of ambitions as well for Europe to deliver on the Green Deal. And it is important, and I want to re-stress a bit what Tina said, that we have all the relevant stakeholders involved in the work at European and international level. So I see we have almost 100 participants online. Please do make sure you reach out to your national standards organizations, that you get involved in European standardization work. I mean, it's a very agile and very dynamic program of work we have. As you see, this TC existed, now it evolved and moves into system standards, and we need you to be part of these discussions, the same as we need partners like Euroheat Power to bring the industry voices as well, both at European level. So I think there's a collaboration to be explored there between Senelec and Euroheat Power, as well as at the national level. One thing that I would like to mention as well is, of course, that we strive to be a very inclusive system, and it's important as well not only to have the industry on board, but it's also important to have the societal voices on board as well. And that is something that we should strive as well in making sure that we capture the environmental needs that are necessary to make this work, that we capture as well the societal needs. Now, to close off, because I think we are running a bit in the time slot that we have for the welcoming words, I do really encourage you to contribute to this standardization work, which is an important piece of work that supports European legislation. We are looking at very ambitious goals for Europe to deliver, and standardization can only work making sure that we have all voices around the table, and only then will we be able to deliver really market-driven standards that respond to your needs. So I look forward to the discussions today with all of you, and to answer any questions, of course, and also collaborate after the webinar further with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Indeed, it's collaborating with all stakeholders in the industry that we can move forward and ensure that the sector is assured, which will ultimately drive investment. Thank you very much. Now that we have gone through the welcoming words, I would like to turn your attention a little bit more as to the reason why we are here today, to understand this extension of TC 107 to include DHC systems. I would like to welcome Lisa, who will give you a bit more of an overview of what has happened and what's to come. Lisa?
Thank you, Crelida. So my name is Lisa Almqvist. I'm the head of standardization in a department called Industry and Construction. And previously I was involved in the work of CEN TC 107, which is the reason why I'm speaking with you today. So I'm going to talk to you about the European standardization in the area and where the work on DHC is done in the committee called CEN TC 107, which was previously mentioned. So the previous scope of the standardization committee only covered district heating and cooling at product level. And the newly accepted extension of the scope now includes standardization of DHC, or district heating and cooling, also at a system level. So we are going from talking about pipes and valves to an overarching system perspective, where standards are a key element of making the entire energy system work. So we also need to keep building on the great work that has already been done within the European standardization in this area. This extension is essential to support the integration of DHC solutions and a cost-effective transition to a fluctuating energy system that you will hear about a little bit later, and also based on several different renewable sources, so in line to support the EU climate targets. It also aims to facilitate cooperation with the newly established standardization committee on a global level, ISO TC 341 heat supply network, to see where standards can be developed together through Vienna Agreement for those of you who speak standardization, and where the European perspective is important to keep, to look at where it's important to sort of keep our perspectives intact. Fulfillment of the potential of DHC calls for a large and long-term investment and a common approach to avoid fragmentation of the market. And this requires planning, financing, and implementation, and standardization can and is a good tool to ensure that these elements are translated into best practice through common approach. So basically, in plain terms, it will be too expensive for us to try and possibly get things wrong. There is, for example, a suggestion to develop a framework standard that will include principles, requirements, and guidance for establishing fourth generation DHC into the energy system. So, like Tina said in the beginning, the standards planned to be developed aimed at facilitating a smart, sector-coupled, renewable-based and cost-efficient energy system in all stages, from planning, financing, design, operation, maintenance, and end of life. So what are we talking about? I mean, we are talking about, we do talk about surveillance systems already in this TC, etc. We are talking about systems, but this is sort of taking it one step further. So standardization at a system level has been proven to be beneficial in achieving cost efficiency and effective implementation in several ways. And I've listed some of the highlights. It reduces complexity, which offers benefits such as cost savings through economies of scale, ease of integration, and improved efficiency. A standard process improves clarity and eliminates the need for guesswork and extra searching. When work is done in a predefined, optimized way, it ensures a high quality outcome. It also promotes productivity, since employees won't need to ask around or comb documentation to get answers, which saves time and resources. And by reducing guesswork, standardization also reduces waste and ensures a high quality outcome, which is good for both the economy and the environment. It helps prevent accidents and other potential hazards, so ensuring a safe and effective implementation. And they simplify the requirements so that all parties involved can get assistance in assuring that the requirements and the overall implementations are both complete and correct. So in summary, standardization at a system level is a really powerful tool for achieving cost efficiency and effective implementation. I'm going to give you a very short, some short examples of where a system approach standards have already helped in system level implementation. If you look at ISO 27001, it's a standard for information security management systems, which helps organizations to protect their data and assets from cyber threats and breaches. Looking at ISO 31000, it's a standard for risk management, which helps organizations to identify, assess, treat, and monitor the risks that may affect their objectives and performance. And my last example, it's ISO 19650. Yet again, I do apologize for the numbers. It's on building information modeling. And the standard provides recommendations for a framework for managing information. It includes exchange, recording, and organizations for all sectors. And the standard is applicable for the entire life cycle of all built assets, including strategic planning, initial design, engineering, development, documentation and construction, day-to-day operations, maintenance, refurbishment, repair, and end of life. So the standard has already been used on assets and projects on different scales and complexity, and worked with flexibility and versatility in a range of procurement strategies. So the work in TC 107 is done by experts from the European countries involved in the TC. And to get a good standard, it is important that we cover all aspects of stakeholders, from user to producer, big and small companies, research and academia, research authorities, and so on. And since there has been a change of scope, more experts are needed in the work to write the standards. And the TC is, for instance, looking for more experts involved in planning, designing, financing, and implementation of the energy systems, and specifically relevant authorities, universities, and consultants. And sort of to reiterate what Andrea said in her welcome speech, please get involved. Please contact your national standardization bodies to get more information and to be able to participate in the work done on European level. All voices are needed around the table. And I'm also pleased to let you know that the TC has a newly appointed chair, Lars Gulev, which you can see on the slide there. He's traveling at the moment, so he's hence unable to attend this workshop. But I'm confident that with his proven track record of great leadership, the European standardization at DHC at a system level is off to a great start. Krelida, you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Lisa. It's interesting to see the evolution from product to system level. And thank you for highlighting the benefits of considering standardization at system level. Indeed, with the extension of the scope, there will be a need for experts. So we highly encourage you to get in touch with your national standardization bodies or with the Secretariat, which is held by the Danish Standards. So now let us move a little bit, now that we have the background as to why the extension, let's focus a little bit on some case studies. I would like to introduce you to Neil, who will give you a little bit of an insight into the UK. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Khalida, and welcome to everybody joining this webinar today. It's really good for me to hear all this focus on systems ahead of in moving from product to systems, as I'm a systems engineer, so why wouldn't I like that? So that's all good to hear. So moving on to my presentation, I'm going to talk about two things really, and just try and define standards moving forward. One, I think, important aspect is the standard of energy supply. So here we're not looking into the detail of design, we're looking more into how are we going to provide this. And as we hopefully all know on this webinar today, district heating and district cooling systems are really key in decarbonising, as we've already touched on in the earlier presentations. So, so it's about what shall we supply, how many low or zero sources can we integrate into the energy supply, and what buildings are feasible to connect to district energy systems. So that's the first area where we can standardise on how we actually deliver that energy, and hopefully from a DHC point of view. And then we have the standards of design or performance. And there have been many technical standards in many different countries that focus very much on specifics of the actual design of items, where it says things like pipework should be sized as a maximum velocity of such, and so on. And that's very good and very detailed. But I'd like to try and focus and move a little bit away from that and focus more on the standardization of the performance of the building rather than the detail of the engineering of it. And what I mean by that is moving away from saying pipework should be sized at to moving to something that says the operating system delta T shall be greater than X for Y periods of time, so to speak. And that's what I think what will really drive efficiency in buildings. So in looking at the UK specifically here, it's been mentioned a number of times. I mean, it was referred to by the Climate Change Committee in 2018 in the UK about moving the amount of buildings on a district heating system in the UK from 2% to 19%, which those people from Scandinavia realize that's pretty poor, but we're getting there anyway. But that was mentioned much earlier than 2018. And actually what we see today, it's only still around 2.5% roughly. And nothing has really driven that forward. Even though funding has been available, and I've listed out two things there, the Green Heat Network Fund, specific in the UK, we have the Heat Network Efficiency Standard, all funding, and there's lots of others that are available for district systems, but they haven't actually grown and expanded as much as we wanted to. And you can see that small growth, 2 to 2.5%, is just not enough, and we need to speed that up. So what the UK government have announced is that there will be heat network zoning in the UK, where there will be 28 designated district energy zones. And these are geographical zones. And if you are within one of those zones, any new building will have to be mandated to connect to the district system. If it is an existing building, then that will also be mandated to connect. Now, we're currently running 3 test programs just to make sure that the methodology is correct, but this has passed through our House of Lords, so it is now becoming law, and it will happen, and it's designated to be the end of next year. And I would see that will be a rapid expansion of the uptake of district energy in the UK. And just one other thing we're doing as well, Ofgem, which is our sort of monitoring body that makes sure that all the stakeholders are well looked after, they've stated that they want to see progressive decarbonisation of heat as well. So it's not just acceptable to say, well, we've created a network, we put some gas boilers in the central plant, and it's all good. If that's what we do, we then have to, over time, slowly decarbonise that network, and they will want to see that as well. So that's another major positive step. So this is phased to be introduced 2024 to 2025, and then obviously it will continue from then on. And hopefully, I'm really positive that this is probably the biggest step I've ever seen in all my time looking into district energy in the UK and wider markets. So when we look at product standards, I'm just going to focus here on HRUs, which are the heat interface unit, which is the terminal unit that you see at the end of the heat network in the apartments or office buildings. And pre-2015 in the UK, there were no standards at all. And this really led us into a very poor situation where you could put anything in a box, and so long as you stamped HRU on the front, then it complied with all the standards. And you can imagine the performance that resulted in. That wasn't very good at all. But then in 2015, BSRIA, which is the Building Services Research and Information Association, they created BG62, which started to look at standardizing on heat interface units. That was improved upon in 2018 with a specific test regime that monitored performance and efficiency, crucially, of HRUs. And then the British standard is being written now. I'm on the steering group that's writing that, and that's expected to be released in 2024. So you can see here in this graph why we need standards. And this is a histogram of return temperature from a building that was built pre any HRU standards. And I happen to know that this building had a 75°C flow temperature, and you can see the vast majority of time the return temperature is around about, say, 68 degrees. So very, very poor. So that shows poor terminal units, it shows poor system design, installation and commissioning, and all that culminates in very low delta T, very inefficient heat network. And that's, as I say, pretty much pre all the standards that we introduced. What we should see is something like this, really. And this is, again, another histogram, only now we're looking at a project that was developed post the standards. And we can see here from a HRU point of view, you now have 3 separate return temperature peaks, one at a very high delta T, somewhere around 22 degrees, where the terminal unit is in hot water production. It's heating there, it's giving you sort of a 48 average return temperature, so much improved from the previous slide, as you saw. So really driving delta T's, and that's a look really at pre-standards and post-standards, and the difference is dramatic. I think you'd agree. So in terms of heat networks themselves in the UK, pre-2015, we used very generic standard HVAC designs. There was nothing specific to district energy. And then in 2015, CIBSE, the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, released their Code of Practice, CP1, which really goes right from feasibility studies up to sort of billing tenants, even on the ends, and everything in between. And it gets updated on a fairly regular basis. And what I do like about this standard is that they have minimum standards and best practice. And what we find is when a new revision comes into place, a lot of the best practices have moved to minimum standards. So the whole document itself actually evolves and gets better and more detailed. And we have other things that come as a support document for that. The Heat Network Design Guide is a great document in 2021 that actually looks into the specific detail of how you actually sit down and design a network from start to finish. And then we add in things like hot water temperatures from instantaneous heat interface units, all these additional documents that just reinforce and add to the foundations supporting the development and the design of district energy systems. And then we have HNTAS, which is the Heat Network Technical Assurance Scheme. Now, HNTAS is something that is still being developed now. I'm not going to read through all these bullet points here, but it's splitting the system up into six elements. And the three that I've highlighted here in red are the important ones. One is it is performance orientated, as I said earlier on, and outcome orientated. So your network needs to achieve this, and then you cannot move to the next stage of this scheme until you have proved that you have complied with the previous stage. So it's a toll gate process where you have to achieve passes at each stage to be able to move on. And the final thing, which I really like, is that final bullet point there in red, that the cost of non-compliance will exceed the cost of rectification, which is really good for me, because it just says, you know, if this network isn't working well, we can't just say, well, I'll pay the fine and we'll just leave it inefficient. No, that the fine will be much more than the cost of actually rectifying and fixing the problem. So obviously it drives everybody to fix the problem, basically. So thank you very much. Any information you have that you need, you have my details there on the screen in front of you. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Neil. It's very interesting to see a practical example where the policies and regulations are driving the sector forward. Thank you for that. It really shows that it emphasizes the importance of standardization. We will now move from the UK to Denmark for a specific case study. Please welcome Tue Christensen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that I have a chance to talk a little about our little district heating company here in southern Denmark. I'll see if I can just move the slides. Yes, a small word on me. I have been producing heat for a long time. In Denmark we have a long-standing tradition for district heating, and I've been working with that since 1969. Yeah. A little bit about us. The company was founded in 1963. At that time, district heating in Denmark was almost not existing, only in the very big cities. Then we started to hook up houses and have a centralized district heating primarily on oil and gas. Since then, we have transitioned, as I will show, to other sources, and we have been becoming a lot more people in the company. Today, we are almost 16,000 actually. We are growing with 600 to 700 meters a year. So this is a little bit outdated figures. Yeah, I'll just pass on. That's not so exciting. Yeah. So where do the heat come from in Sonderborg? We have a lot of sources from our heat production. We have solar, biomass. We have surplus heat from energy recovery from our power plant. So the district heating company actually operates a power plant where we primarily energy recover residual waste. We are not allowed to have landfills in Denmark, so the waste that cannot be reused is incinerated, and the energy from the waste is then used for electricity production, and then the waste heat from that is used to heat up houses. That has been a law for many years that we have to do that in Denmark, and so we have one of these plants that we own and operate. Then we have a couple of gas engines that produce both electricity and heat. Primarily today, they are just there for sector coupling, also to ensure that we have electricity in the grid. So if the prices are high and we need more electricity, we start the engines. Otherwise, we produce our heat at different sources. Bear in mind that we cover a large geographical area. I will show that in a later slide. I have just tried to show our production plants here in this slide. They are scattered around. At each site, we have a heat storage tank. Very important to make sure that we can stabilize the district heating grid. So to the left, you can see we have a city, Gråsten, a smaller city, where we have a gas engine, we have solar panels, and we have a straw boiler. So the straw from the boiler is produced locally by farmers, and then we use that to produce heat there. As a peak unit and as a backup, we have natural gas in that area. Moving along to Sønderborg, the bigger city, we also have a heat storage tank. We have a gas turbine and a steam turbine. So that's from the power plant where we also obviously burn the waste. And then we have a biomass boiler. It's a wood chip boiler. We only use sustainable biomass, meaning biomass picked up as a rest from furniture production and stuff like that. Then we have a little bit of geothermal energy. Moving on along, we have another small city where we also have solar panels, a wood chip boiler, and again, out in Augustenborg, we have a gas motor electric boiler. And all these areas are interconnected so that we can change or exchange heat between the areas. So if we look at our grid and our geographically build-up, we have Augustenborg out to the right and we have Gråsten to the left. There's approximately 20 kilometers between the two cities. In Denmark, most of our houses are one-family houses. So the majority of our consumers are one-family houses scattered around. And that also means we have a lot of piping, smaller pipes that distributes the heat to the one-family houses. But we can then change or exchange heat between the areas. As you can see here on the schematic, we are very observant on the importance of being able to utilize the different heat sources to make sure that we have the cheapest production price at all time, but also make sure that we have the right hydraulic capabilities in the grid so that all our consumers have the heat that they need. We are at the moment expanding our grid, where we are building a transmission line between two of our cities. And I just thought that we are talking standardization. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we do that here in Sønderborg. Usually we have a transmission line. A transmission line for us is a hot line, which is between 70 and 95 degrees. We try to reduce the forward temperature as much as possible, but we want to be able to not have too big pipes. So in order to get the hydraulic working right, we have to go up in temperature when it's really cold. And in summertime, we then try to lower the temperature. We have a computer system that always calculates and try to foresee the demand, and then we can calculate which is the right temperature to move the heat forward with. Yeah, this slide's not. So besides houses, we also try to include industries. And in this example, we have a slaughterhouse, which is actually equivalent to 1,000 houses. So the slaughterhouse is an unusual customer for us. But it turns out that they actually use 80 degrees hot water for most of their production. And if we connect them to the district heating network, we can actually release 40,000 tons of carbon from their production. So it turns out that the easiest way for the slaughterhouse to reduce its emission footprint is to be part of the district heating company. And since we are already transitioning to carbon neutrality, and we need to do it anyway, we can combine our effort with their effort, and those making the cheapest possible transition. Also, we are trying to integrate waste heat from other production facilities that can then be used in the slaughterhouse as a heat source. When we convert cities, we then try to go down as low as possible in forward temperature. So at the moment, our lowest forward temperature is 60 degrees. And for very rare hours in the year when it's really, really cold, we go up to 75. Again, we have computer softwares looking after the districts to make sure that we have the right temperature at the right time. But all the houses are designed, new houses are designed for 60, the older houses are designed for 70, but usually we are able to get along with 60 degrees for all houses in Denmark. Yeah. It's only if the pipes are getting too small for that, if the demand is too high, that we go up. So at the end, before each area, we have a central, but we have pumps and pipes, pumps and valves that reduces the pressure from the heat transfer lines, and then also with the shunt system, so that we can ensure that we lower the temperature in the area. All areas are lowered individually of each other. And just to see how it looks, when we go in and we convert an area, we simply zoom in, and then we have this grid where all houses are interconnected. Usually we have around 80% of the houses in an area on the district heating grid where we are. Yes. And our goal with our district heating company is to make sure that we have the most cost-effective path to carbon neutrality. And to do that is simply to lower the overall heat demand by utilizing waste heat and distributing it to the houses in the area. We believe that that is the way forward, and also we have the fortune that we can save energy in our heat storage tank. This, when we have a surplus production in Denmark from the windmills and the solar panels, we can take them in and we can store them for when they are not producing that much, and then help stabilizing the grid. Thank you. That was what I had from you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to have a specific case and to really look at how you are going through the path to full decarbonization. Thank you. We will now move to Professor Brian van Matteson, who will give us a bit more of a perspective on how standardizations and REPowerEU can be linked. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So I will be talking about district heating and cooling in the light of standardization, both in a technical and planning process perspective. One of the things that is really key to try and understand is that not only is heating in general neglected, it is policy-wise, it is also somewhat neglected on the standardization side wise. We know that 2/3 of the final energy demand is space heating is a substantial amount of European energy demand, and 75% comes from burning fossil fuels. We know that we have more and more natural gas in our heating system, which is what we've been trying to fight during the energy crisis in the later years here, or in the last 2 years. In a recent report, Heat Matters, the missing link in REPowerEU, we've also showed that many of the countries who have higher district heating levels have very low natural gas levels in the heating sector, and that quite a lot have, with those that have very little district heating, have more than half of their fossil fuels in the individual heating. So we know that district heating can actually be shown to have had a good influence on expelling fossil fuels, and we can also see that it is able to use waste heat and renewable energy sources to contribute not only to the energy crisis but also to the climate crisis. So we find it extremely important to see this in that light. One of the things that I thought was also nice in the Sønderborg case, which is aligned with what we believe should be the focus of buildings, is to look at all of the different elements of a building and of the heating sector. This is regarding the thermal performance of buildings. We need more efficient buildings. That goes hand in hand with the new supply mix, which we saw also a case of here in Sønderborg, that more and more lower temperature heat sources we can then use directly in the new built houses that we saw a case of here, but also in general, if we lower the existing buildings heat demand, then we can also use more waste heat and have lower temperatures in general. Of course, the building operation and user behavior is also important. That goes hand in hand with how you use a better building as such, but also how you are then able to integrate and use more of the new sources. There is a balance in regards to how much energy we are able to save in the existing building stock, and there is a balance between the heat savings and the supply of heat. We can see that there are really vast potentials in our Heat Roadmap Europe series. We have documented how there are similar cities all around that have very different levels of district heating. Now I see that Copenhagen is covered here, but we have in Copenhagen maybe 99% of the heat demands are covered with district heating, but in London and for example Rome, we have very low levels of district heating. So I think standardization and spreading of knowledge, which is very which is possible to do, of course, with this kind of mapping that we have done, but also with standardization is extremely important. Here's a case of the Netherlands, where I really think it's important to spread knowledge about district heating. There's a lot going on in the Netherlands right now. But what we have documented here in Heat Roadmap Europe is that we almost have twice the amount of excess heat currently than the heat demand in the Netherlands. And there's a very, very low heat demand covered with district heating. So the use of standardization here is really important. Here's another case study where we have a UK city which has a demand of district heating or heating in general. It doesn't have district heating right now, but it has a heating demand of 10 petajoules per year. And we can see that there's excess heat just nearby with our mapping on heatroadmapeurope.eu, which is not used. So we really need to try not only to understand the technical details about why temperatures are lower, but also understand how we can implement planning processes in order to harvest this. If we look at, in general, the heat demands or the waste heat sources in Europe, this report that I talked about before that we just published, Heat Matters, the missing link in REPowerEU, we documented that we have a potential of more than 2,000 terawatt hours per year, and in a system where we have also made heat savings that can actually cover all of the heat demand in Europe, which is of course not possible because we shouldn't have district heating everywhere. But this is just to show that there is really a vast resource that is unharvested. 22 countries can cover more than 50% of their current heat demand with these sources, and the sources we have listed here are low temperature industrial waste heat, medium temperature industrial waste heat, high temperature industrial waste heat from sewage water, waste heat from retail, waste heat from metro stations, deep geothermal, more than 50 degrees and more than 90 degrees, waste heat from data centers, waste heat from electrolysis. So there are really vast potentials here, and that requires quite large investments. And in order not to make investments that are, let's say, in the wrong direction. We really need some good standards in order to make the right type of investments. And in that report, we have documented that we should have more than 500 billion invested in thermal grids in the coming years. The sources are many, but there are also a lot of challenges. So just to mention a few, with waste heat, for example, how do we determine what is a sustainable waste heat source? Are there any fluctuating issues that with the supply? How do we mitigate the risks when we do geothermal? Risks of drilling failure, for example, scaling and corrosion. There are also risks if we want to use solar thermal systems, but we do also have a number of possible solutions for that, where we can sort of mitigate some of these challenges. And in order not to have those learnings starting from scratch everywhere, it's really important to have it as much as possible in a standardized way. Now, this table here is from a report we did together with IRENA called Integrating Low Temperature Renewables in District Heating Systems. So this is also publicly available information. Going forward, and I was happy to see the district heating case from Sønderborg, we really need to go to this fourth generation type of district heating. That means that we need a coordinated effort with the buildings and the district heating system and the sources. And it's very complicated to do that if you have to have the whole overview all the time. So it is very good if some of these elements automatically can play together to lift this possibility, because district heating is really at an essential part of the green transition. If we do not do this with thermal grids, our let's say green transition will be much more expensive. The district heating can really integrate quite a lot. It can regulate not only with heat storages in order to integrate the waste heat sources. It can actually also cheaply integrate wind power, for example, using large-scale heat pumps when we have readily available electricity in the grid. We have efficient heat pumps that can then use the thermal storages, high or low temperature thermal storages in the district heating system. When we need power from combined heat and power, we of course can store that heat. We can also store other types of heat sources. So the district heating infrastructure, it's a key message from me that the district heating infrastructure is a key part of integrating not only waste heat, but also renewable energy sources such as geothermal and solar thermal that we cannot harvest in the electricity system, but also that we can use this to integrate better and more efficiently in the electricity system by combining this and have a sector coupling. Now, there's a lot of regulatory things going on in Europe, and actually we could say we have maybe 30 plus experiments in Europe going on about how we regulate this system. But it's also clear that regulation does matter if we want to spread district heating. I think the ownership models, the levels of profit, the types of technical standards, or also organizational standards are really important. And this is where we can see the standardization can further the utilization of local heat sources. If we have knowledge about expanding and maintaining district heating networks already, if we have better standardization, it can play a vital role in the decision-making process, both on the planning side, but also to upgrade existing technical systems or implementing new cost-effective models and technical systems in new areas. And we really need this past learning to be built into the standards in order to have this transition. So this can also build the capacity around the technical knowledge about the planning processes, and we can ensure that we use really only the best practices to use this. So I just have 2 more points. One point is that you can go into the ARENA report to look at the different processes. I think some of these elements could be included in the standardization. And with those words, I would like to say thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's interesting to have a perspective on how standardization can further the use of local heat sources, and thank you for highlighting its importance for the sector. As previously mentioned, we have a Q&A session, and I invite all the participants to please submit your questions. You already have some for the speakers. I'm going to turn to Lisa. And could you please tell us what are the main challenges in standardization today?
I would say that, well, sometimes the knowledge about the standardization system is a main challenge. I mean, standards and standardization, it's such an excellent tool to get solutions ready that are sort of everyone agrees on a system or an approach and how to check quality and so on. But the knowledge is sometimes a bit low about that system, and sort of Sen and Senelec do have in their strategy for 2030 to increase the use and awareness of our deliverables. So I think we are on point of trying to get ahead of that challenge, but it is an issue, I would say.
Okay, we have heard you and Andrea mention the need for experts for the TC 107. Could you please tell us what are the prerequisites to be a participant in standardization?
I mean, everyone can participate in standardization. You don't have to have a doctorate or in a specific topic. I mean, like Andrea said, all voices are needed around the table. And just a quick note that sometimes it can seem a bit difficult to maybe understand the system. I talked about speaking standardization and so on. But if you are not involved today, please get information from your national standardization body, and we are happily helping you to sort of get things going and help you get acquainted with the system and so on.
I do have a question from the audience. It says, how long will it take to develop the TC 107 standard for DHC? But the standard already exists, right?
Yes, so it's sort of dependent on what standard. We do have a package of standards already in place, both for district heating and district cooling. It's on surveillance systems and pipe systems and so on, and design and what have you. So if we are talking about, for instance, the suggestion to write the guidance standard, it will be dependent. All standards are sort of dependent on how difficult the topic is to get consensus around, and what experts are around the table that can contribute. So a sort of standard development time is sort of varies between 18 months up to 3 years.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I will turn to Neil and ask you, if a heat network uses so many different products from different manufacturers, how can standards cover all of these different aspects?
Yes, it can be problematic because there are little idiosyncrasies between different manufacturers' product. But this is where I like the approach from a system point of view rather than a product point of view, and that move towards the system. Because at the end of the day, it's the system that matters, not the product. So if we can standardize on the system, in terms of its performance, because that's what we want the system to do, then we take into account any difference between individual products, because it's the performance of the system that we want to standardize on, which is its efficiency and its integration of renewable energy and so on. So I think the fact of just moving to systems takes away that difficulty, I think.
In that case, do you think that, what is your opinion? Do standards slow down or hinder progress or stifle innovation?
They have the potential to do that, but I think if we are clever enough in how they're written, and also I'd sort of point you towards CP1 that I mentioned earlier on, where that particular standard has a relatively short shelf life, if I word it that way. That's not to mean it becomes obsolete, but the plan is that every 2 to 3 years it's reviewed and a revision is released. And I really like that progression that is in sort of really in the DNA of that document, that basically says we will improve this document, we will release a revised one, and what we will do is those, as I mentioned, the best practices and the minimum requirements, they basically, the minimum requirements just disappear and the best practices become minimum requirements, and a new set of best practices come in as we learn. You know, every day is a school day, everybody is learning every day, and you know, we will be more knowledgeable in the future than we are now, and that needs to be reflected in our standards.
Thank you very much, Neil. Brian, I have a question for you. Could you please share your views on REPowerEU? Since you mentioned cuts in gas, you mentioned the study. Could you please elaborate a little bit?
So we can see that in general in many sort of decarbonization scenarios, but also in REPowerEU, that it seems that thermal networks are excluded or forgotten in the modeling. And what we can see is that in regards to expelling gas, we can actually increase the expulsion of Russian gas from what has already been planned in REPowerEU by 8%, if we included considerations about district heating. This will require quite large investments, but these investments will pay off if we do it in the right way, because we will then save on individual boilers or individual heat pumps in those areas where we can have district heating, and we'll also save on the fuel consumption. So I think the focus has really been dominated, for example, in the eco design directives with regards to boilers, to have more efficient boilers, which is fine, and also in the EPDB, in the energy performance of buildings, the directive about how buildings should perform, but there is really a lack of attention for the system level, both on the technical side and the planning side. So I think this is really important to understand the interplay between the supply system and the performance of the buildings, and I think to bridge that gap, the more focus we can have on spreading the knowledge about this, the better.
In this sense, as you highlighted the need to spread the knowledge, I would ask you, how do we do that? How do we ensure that, for example, the authorities and economic players, the cities, are more aware of standards? How do we ensure that we are sharing the knowledge from countries with more established systems, for example?
Well, I think it can be very hard to know exactly, let's say, what kind of both planning methods and technical knowledge is possible to implement if you're a local stakeholder, a local municipality, a local region, and you will then rely quite a lot on consultants or something like that, and they will also in some cases not know exactly what to do. And in that respect, I think the recent development in the energy efficient directive demanding that cities with more than 45,000 inhabitants is really important. And we see also a good development in that approach in Germany, where they have similar heat planning legislation that we do in Denmark, actually. But I can see that standardization can really provide sort of a base knowledge about how to do things, how to approach things in also a credible and independent way, where the local stakeholders, being it politicians or local civil servants, and also consultants not used to working in this area, can at least understand the minimum standards or the best practices. So I really see that as an important step forward.
Thank you very much, Brian. Neil, I see that you would like to share something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it was just two comments listening to Brian talking there. He mentioned about, you know, the individual approach and non-individual approach, and I think it's something that needs restating. I think that most countries have plans to get to net zero at some point. Doesn't really matter what date you put on that, but if we expect that the individual will make individual changes and will somehow end up at net zero, then we're fooling ourselves. It has to be, particularly obviously in cities, the district approach that will lead to the wholesale reduction of carbon and lead to actually achieving net zero. That was one point. And the second point I wanted to make was just that we really need to raise the profile of DHC. We need to raise the profile of standards. We need to raise the profile of the benefits that DHC brings to everybody. You know, in the integration of renewables, hopefully reducing in cost, reducing this volatility of the energy crisis, where energy costs are constantly fluctuating up and down, which nobody likes. We need to promote all this. We need to raise the awareness of DHC and its benefits to the wider public, really. Particularly, there's some countries where it's known quite a lot, but there are many countries where you say district heating and everybody looks at you and go, what's that? And we need to do that. We need to promote ourselves, really, and promote district energy. Indeed.
Tue, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight on what Brian and Neil said with regard to saving energy, actually, because collectively we have a chance to save energy, and electricity is a scarce resource that is maybe better used for power to X than heating up individual houses. So in that respect, I really believe that it should be pushed hard, and at least that's what we believe in here in our company. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will have just one last question, and I will put it to Andrea, since you represent standards at European level. I have a comment here which says the focus is very much on Europe. Standardization is now starting on ISO level. I personally know that we have standards both at European and at global level, so ISO. Would you like to take this one, Andrea? Sorry, you are muted.
My apologies. I wasn't sure if it would be me or Lisa, because Lisa mentioned already the Vienna Agreement. Thank you for the question, or passing the question to me. I think what would have been quite interesting, because I do hear there's a lot of, and it's true, we do need to work a lot more on awareness and understanding of standardization, what standardization is and how it can support both very, I would say, concrete fragmentation questions and issues that the industry raises, but also policy objectives. It would have been nice to have a poll to see from the experts online how many are aware of standardization or participate in standardization. On this very specific question, which I see it's Geert, I think, asked that. We have a very well-established frame, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is called the Vienna Agreement. So that doesn't, it's not that it doesn't allow us, that forces us between SEN and ISO to always work together and make sure we don't duplicate efforts. Now, the work of the TC that was mentioned here and the TC 107 is very much mirroring and picking up on the ISO TC 341. So I think it's very much in our DNA, if you want, to make sure that we have the right tools to develop common solutions wherever possible between the European and international level. The intention is really to provide industry and stakeholders one global solution. There are some very European specificities, and I think there was a clear mention of a lot of European regulation, which sometimes sets requirements that are more European specific, and we need to address those through standards, and that's where we might have some deviations. But absolutely, the intention is to have one global solution, European and international. So we do adopt international standards identical at European level, or we put forward European standards at the international level. So the focus, of course, for today was European standardization, because we are focusing on the CEN-TC. But that doesn't mean we are not very attentive, and the Secretariat and our members, the SIS, but all the others are very attentive as well at what happens at the international level. Technical capacity remains an issue, and I think that's where we need to make sure that we have the right experts, the most variety of experts around the table. And webinars like today are that need to launch that kind of awareness and interest, and discussions do happen. And I think Lisa mentioned that as well. The standardization work advances. So if experts are not part of the discussions, are not part, taking place or being around the table to discuss these, the standards will continue and they will evolve, and then they will be put forward at the international level or adopted from the international at the European level. So really my strong encouragement is for all stakeholders around the webinar today, but also those you work with, to be in touch and connect with their national standards organizations. It's a one stop shop, if you want, through the national standards organizations, and then you will be part of these very lively and ongoing discussions where you see there's lots of challenges being raised, a lot of issues being raised, a lot of national differences as well, which standardization brings together to harmonize, to make sure we have one solution that then facilitates really the competitiveness of the district heating industry. So I think that's an important message. And yes, we're not duplicating with the international, and there is a very clear system in place of ensuring there is a continuous dialogue and connection between ISO and CEN.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And I would like to thank all of the speakers for being here. Indeed, we have a message to pass on, as you mentioned. For the sector to move forward, we need experts there. So I highly encourage all of the experts present today, and those who potentially will see the recordings, to please contact the Danish Standards, to contact your national standardization bodies and get involved, because as it was mentioned, we need to raise the profile of DHC, and we need to raise the standards also. We need to raise awareness among the public. And I know I started working with certification in 2018, and it was something difficult to understand. But while it can be tempting to dismiss it as too technical or difficult to understand, we hope the webinar today has shown that every aspect of the DHC sector can benefit from regulations. They provide the necessary assurances to attract investment needed to achieve the sector's potential, and the guidance for planning and designing new and refurbished systems. So please do keep in touch with us, keep in touch with your national standardization bodies, and hopefully we will move the sector forward. We will achieve the potential with the help of standards. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day. Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.